Alderwoman Young, is she in here? No. Okay. Alderman Vice Chairman Boyd.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I have several questions. Mike, is it your understanding, well, let me just ask this way, will the efficiency technologies that Veolia come up with be proprietary to Veolia?
Well, that's a good question. That was one of the original concerns in the original draft is once the report was issued, what we could do with it, and it seemed to be somewhat limiting. That's why we negotiated in that clause where we have the license to use the product at no cost. So once the report's done, we can use it as we see fit, which was not in the original draft of the agreement.
Right.
They do retain a proprietary interest, which I think as a practical matter, it won't prevent us from using it. It might prevent us from like going out and reselling it or something like that.
Okay, in one of my past lives, I'm familiar with Johnson Controls, and Johnson Controls, what I know about them is they're into the energy efficiency business, but they have certain technologies that other energy efficiency companies have, and all of it is proprietary. So generally when Johnson Controls, and I'm not picking on them, but I know a little bit about them, they would write the RFP for, let's say, a school district, for example, and the RFP would be specific to them, basically, and they would come in and you would have to use their technologies in order to gain the energy efficiencies to, generate the cost savings. So my question is, actual hardware, will there be any systems that will be employed by Veolia that will generate these efficiencies that we will be beholden to Veolia to use those technologies? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I do. I understand the question. Mr. Scobie would probably be I went over the operational stuff with him when we were revising this, and I don't understand that part of it as well as he does. So,
okay. Well, can he stand with you? Is that okay, Madam Chairman?
Mrs. Scobie, yes, could you come up?
Did you understand the question?
And basically that we would be, by this contract, buying or committing to some proprietary
hardware technologies
or intellectual knowledge that we have to pay them for grooming. It's not in this right now. I'm not sure what they would have that we would, product that we would be bid along that line that they have to offer, that we would have an ongoing fee for the privilege of continued usage, like a license.
Right.
That'd be some of the consideration if they make a recommendation to use this product or their intellectual property and have to have an annual fee. That'd be something that we would take into account when we decide to move forward.
Okay. Compensation. If this passes and signed off by ENA, they want to go back to ENA, or is there just agreement with the administration to move forward in phase 2?
It provides a couple of options. You could renegotiate a deal pursuant to this contract for phase 2, or you can go through another selection process.
But as this is written, it doesn't have to come back to ENA, is that correct?
Well, an amendment would have to be signed off by the comptroller and whoever signs the agreement, but it doesn't have to be necessarily approved by ENA, no.
Okay.
What the ENA has the hammer in terms of appropriation. If ENA wants to appropriate, could withhold appropriation for that contract. So whatever that amount would be, that's how they would control the process.
Okay. Intellectual property. The specific reports and related documents that are deliverable by Veolia under this agreement, including specifically the phase 1 analysis and any further developmental documents prepared as part of the phase 2 services, shall be owned by the city. Okay, I read that and I understand that, but then when I went to Article 15 on exclusivity, I kind of got confused.
So I was just writing a note on your first comment to make sure I address it in the contract.
Okay. You ready?
I'm looking, yeah.
Okay, Article 15. it talks about exclusivity, and the city shall not purchase from any person or entity other than an affiliate of Veolia consulting services substantially similar to Phase 1 services provided by Veolia during the term of this agreement. What does that really mean? Because the agreement, in my understanding, is only 4 months.
Right, so during that 4 months, we can't hire anybody else to do the same thing Veolia is doing.
Oh, okay.
That's kind of a no-brainer in the contract.
Okay, and this licensing agreement, kind of going back what the chairwoman was saying, Veolia shall be entitled to all right, title, and interest in and to all ideas, conceptions, discoveries, interventions, improvements, blah, blah, blah. Now, if I'm paying you to develop some software for me, you're a contract, and I'm paying you to develop this for me, why wouldn't I own that if I'm paying you to do that for me?
I asked the same question when we started, and I think you almost answered it. You were talking about another company that has their own proprietary information they use to develop things. So the friction was allowing Veolia to protect its proprietary interest, but allowing us unfettered use of the product that they provide us. So the solution was that they would be the owner of the proprietary information, but we would have the unrestricted license to use it. That's how we decided to address that issue.
This is a document. This is not the product is a document, a report, an analysis of everything they went through to come up with these cost-saving measures. Is that correct?
That's how I envision it coming out, yes.
So it's not like a piece of technology. Again, it's not like a thermostat or whatever widget or gadget that one may use that is solely produced by several entities in the universe, but this one is more specific toward Veolia. So I don't get how a document could be proprietary to anyone other than a person who paid for it.
Well, what we're getting when we paid for it is the unrestricted use of the product. If there's proprietary information contained within there, like I'm not sure I could explain it very well, but we have the right to use it. And that's all we're really contracting for is the unfettered right to use the product. If there's some confidential trade secret, software information, stuff like that, within what they give us, we have the right to use it, but they still own it. That's how we decided to phrase it. And that would mean that we can use it, but we can't go out and peddle it somewhere else either.
Right. But chances are, obviously because 4 or 5 people responded to the RFP, there's lots of different software that do the same thing, basically, right?
I imagine, yeah.
My concern is paying a consultant to provide a report and be obligated to their proprietary products. I just have a problem with that. If we're paying you for a report, there should be nothing in the report that's proprietary. I'm asking you to come in and look at some energy efficiency opportunities for me to save money, and you do your analysis, and it is what it is. You make these recommendations, and there are a lot of different people out there that make certain hardware to give you some achievable results as it relates to efficiencies.
I'm not the expert on it. My understanding is that a large part of these recommendations will be a system of controls and operating systems and stuff like that Veolia has developed, perhaps, and maybe other companies don't have access to. And that could be in a report, and the report will be public. So if there's something to be gleaned from a public report that some other company can use, that's one thing. But if there's proprietary information such as computer systems and things like that that would be installed, I think that's what we're talking about.
Right, but it speaks again to my point. First of all, it should be, I would think it's generic. You know, my recommendation is that you purchase some software that meets these specifications. And when you search for that particular software, you will find that there are plenty of vendors that provide that software. Again, and this is not a slight against Veolia, because I'm just talking about the language in the contract. I'm sure
it might be, you know, Like I said, I'm not a water division expert. I could have Mr. Scobie maybe address this. I hate to throw him back.
No, throw him under the bus.
Okay.
Come on, Mr. Scobie. And everybody appreciates you, Kurt, and we know you have over 30 years of experience, so this is probably not the first time you've ever heard of a company as Veolia coming in to do what they do. Would that be a good assumption?
That's correct.
Okay, can you move closer to the mic?
Well, you're going to throw me under the bus, and I.
No, I'm getting ready to pick you up. I'm going to
Okay.
bring you up from under the bus. So you kind of hear where I'm going with this proprietary issue, right?
Yeah, I think what we're paying for a study and the ability to use this at no additional cost. I mean, we're not, I mean, maybe they own some of the ideas that come out of it, but we have the ability to use it and delegate it to anybody we hire for us in our utility to utilize this report. So I think our needs are met and our interests are met in the way it's written.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure exactly what they would develop out of this, or what. I mean, this is something that I think Veolia, when they talk, they may be able to address more specifically.
Okay.
Because we have the ability to use the information and suggestions here for our own purpose, and we're protected in that respect, as I see it.
Yeah, but if there's something in this report that you want to use that is proprietary, then you have no choice moving forward but to engage Veolia in phase 2, for example. Wouldn't that be correct?
Well, that's true of anything that's proprietary. I mean, if something's developed in this 4-month study that is proprietary, if it's developed then, we have the right to use it and utilize it the way we want, or hire somebody to implement it, or for our own purposes.
I don't think so. I think I read something in here that you don't have a right to allow somebody else to implement.
On our behalf, I think, but I think the question comes in if we were trying to sell this to somebody else or provide a service to make money or share it, then that would prohibit us from doing it. But I'm not I'm stretching it because don't have a law background.
Okay.
I'm going to drag Mike back into this.
Look at the time.
Thanks, Kurt.
As he was talking, I was trying to think back about the evolution of the contract. Initially, it had a provision saying that Veolia owned everything, and that was it. I think the discussion went something along the lines, I asked the other attorney, like, specifically, what are you trying to protect here? Maybe we could just state that in the contract. And he was unable to identify it. It was a general idea more than a specific idea. So since neither one of us knew what was trying to be protected, we decided to give the city the exclusive right to use it, because that was the city's concern, that we would somehow be restricted in our use of the information and report. So that may have been an attorney's, this may be an attorney's fault if you have an issue with it, because we were looking for the best way to address it from our standpoint when probably neither one of us fully understood it.
Yeah. But and the way it's written is what made it stand out for me. I mean, if you're going to give me exclusive rights to it, why is it proprietary? If I can do whatever I want to with it, why does it need to be proprietary if I'm paying for it?
Well, since I'm throwing people under the bus, maybe Veolia can answer some of those.
Right, and I don't know how the alderwoman is proceeding, but I'm going to stop with my questions and ask my colleagues if they have any questions. Alderman Vollmer.
Thank you, my esteemed colleague from the 22nd, for being short-winded. So this contract is basically 4 months, correct, Mike? From when the day begins, 4 months it ends. That's all the obligation the city has with Veolia.
Correct.
Any ideas developed that Veolia has, the St. Louis Water Department can use for the rest of their existence, ad infinitum, with no payment or anything to them. They have the ideas, they can use those ideas and purchase anything that Veolia recommends from anyone else, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And Veolia still has the right to sell these ideas to other cities, to other people once they've developed them, because we're not in the business of doing anything but making water at the water department, correct?
That's right.
So, when we have no obligation to use anything they come up with from this contract, correct?
Correct.
Very nice job on the contract, thank you.
Cole's not here. Alderman Onowitz.
Nothing at this time.
Alderman Ogilvy.
Thanks. Well, I'm glad you got a chance to take a look at this one, Mr. Garvin. I think that, you know, what I'm most interested in, and I think we sort of had an answer, is what happens at the end of phase one. Enlisting outside technical help, I think could benefit what the water division is doing, and that's what we're starting down the road to do. But my guess is that a $250,000 consulting contract is a rounding error in Veolia's whole worldwide operations on their balance sheet. So what they're interested in is obviously a long-term relationship. Otherwise, they wouldn't have invested all the manpower in getting this far. And so then what I'm interested in is how are we going to consummate or not consummate that long-term relationship? So 4 months from now, phase one ends, and I think what I heard, there's this term that's in both the RFP and in the draft contract, and that is mutually agreed upon. And I think your answer was that the comptroller can extend the contract at that point.
Well, not just the comptroller, but the comptroller's signature would be required, yeah.
Comptroller and who else?
Well, typically when the city amends a contract or extends, the same people who signed it originally have the ability to negotiate and execute the amendment. And that virtually always includes the comptroller, because the comptroller had to sign the contract, almost all contracts originally.
So the comptroller can or cannot?
Well, the comptroller will be one party to it.
Who are the other?
The signing party, which typically is the director of the department.
Okay.
So that would be Mr. Scobie, I guess.
Anybody else?
The city council would have to sign off as to form, as with any other contract. And E&A would have to approve the appropriation.
Right, so that's interesting because E&A doesn't have to approve the contract itself. Now, the city is in the business of paying its debts and paying its obligations, correct?
Correct.
So if we have the comptroller, I hope, if we have the comptroller extend the contract and then E&A not appropriate the money to pay the contract, we're going to be in court because we have an obligation to pay on the terms of the contract that we would not be fulfilling, is what I would imagine. So it's important because it sounded to me like President Reed's office was under the assumption that E&A would sort of get a second bite at the apple.
That is, as a matter of practice, not legal requirement, what happens.
Okay.
And if I can go into that if you want, but what I was talking about is the bare legal requirement. What happens in practice is the contract goes to E&A and they vote on it. And the comptroller doesn't sign anything, and that's just her personal policy, I think. She's never told me that, but it appears to be that she wants it to go through E&A before she signs.
Okay, so the contract, we can maybe assume that it's the practice of the current comptroller to not, we could say, unilaterally extend contracts or amend contracts and extend them.
Well, she wouldn't be able, she wouldn't be unilateral. I mean, Mr. Scobie would have to sign because he signs in the city council. I mean, I don't want to, if I made it sound like the comptroller could do it on her own, I didn't mean to.
Okay. I think this is the most important part of this that we actually understand, though. And it is your opinion as legal counsel to the city that this requires a second vote of E&A to extend the contract into phase 2?
No,
No.
if you're talking about legal requirements, E&A is required to appropriate the funds. That's the E&A's role in the process. As a matter of practice, many contracts are brought to E&A that aren't technically required to, but that's just become the practice over the years.
Okay, so we gotta put a little bit of faith in things operating as they typically operate.
If you're worried about that, I'll confess I haven't given that deep thought before you start asking the questions, but
Well, I mean, it's a legal consideration, but it's really also a public policy consideration because we love to have data and information, but the rubber hits the road when we get to implementation.
right.
And that's where we're going to need, right now the whole debate has been about who the company is we hire. And my sense is that we might get decent or good data from any company. It's what we do with that data that is going to determine whether we've enacted a good policy or a bad policy. People are happy, sad, the water division has balanced budgets, et cetera. And so I'm just really interested in seeing this conversation happen after phase 1. And I'm really concerned that it won't happen and that we will, you and I know it's hard to get people to go to an E&A meeting. So I worry that we will extend this contract or enter into some type of long-term agreement without really any public scrutiny. After all, the agendas are only published 24 hours in advance, and if you don't know what you're looking for, it flies right by and it's done with.
You're talking about the public as opposed to the E&A members themselves.
Well, they'll know, yeah. They'll know it's coming.
Say, the E&A attendance is generally very good among the members.
Well, there's only 3 members, right. That's my consideration. I think that I have a much smaller concern about who owns the information. I think we'll own the information. Expert in water operations, I don't know. What may come of this, though, is that Veolia may recommend use chemical X to treat the water. By the way, we are the only company that sells chemical X. Or use control system alpha to run your operations. By the way, we are the only company that can implement this, and it is we are the only people who know how to run it after the fact either. And we're not actually going to train your workforce on how to run it. So now we are an inseparable component of the water division, ad infinitum.
So you would like to see some additional safeguards built in to try and prevent that?
Well, maybe we can't prevent that. But what we can do at the end of phase 1 is at least be able to have that conversation. Because if that's what they recommend, it's going to require some real thought as to whether that's the road we go down or not go down. If they just say, hey, install solar panels, use less chlorine, whatever, then we can do that on our own. But I think what we're going to get is something more that is something that they have worked out in other systems that they think they would be best able to implement and not our employees.
I asked you for a recommendation. I actually am serious. I've been taking notes the whole time. This is just a draft. It's still, revisions are still contemplated. So,
recommendation on the contract?
Yeah. And,
what if I could, I made a request to Mr. Roth about reporting at the end of phase 1 to the public. If I could do if I could have a second change to this contract, I would specify that E&A needs to approve phase 2 extensions, and that those extensions, we're going to need information on those extensions, whether they have a finite timeline, which recommendations are incorporated into that Phase 2 extension.
Okay, Alderman, does that conclude your questions?
It does, thank you.
Okay. Alderwoman Cruzen had some questions.
Thank you, Chairman Flowers. This is a bit of a follow-on, Mike, but I think in Exhibit B, the way I read this, the steering committee would get to decide.
Alderman, can you come on up here so we can all hear you? That way you can be publicly heard. Keep walking across here. She's.
Thank you. Sorry, Joe. In Exhibit B, it seems like the steering committee is given the power to decide whether or not to go forward with Phase 2. And as you point out, they'd have to find a way to pay for it. But to the extent it could come out of the Water Division's existing budget, they could do that. Or to the extent they put it in next year's budget, Board Bill 1 somehow, that could be done probably without any more public discussion of it. That's just my reading of Exhibit B.
I don't think it says that the steering committee would decide whether or not to implement Phase 2. I think the decision would be made, and then the steering committee would then have the implementation responsibility once the decision is made to
Okay.
engage in Phase 2
Perhaps.
services.
I'm just reading that it says the steering committee will determine how to proceed regarding recommendations contained in the study.
But that comes after it says the city in its sole discretion can decide whether or not to.
Right. Okay. Well, so long as it's, I guess, clear somehow in here.
And
I'm
we
not a
have just-
lawyer.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, it's okay. I'm not a lawyer. I think you get my point.
Phase 2 is going to be negotiated in its entirety anyway. So
Okay.
Exhibit B is general guidance,
Okay.
everything is subject to
Great.
negotiation.
Article 6 and Article 7 address insurance and indemnity, but in my view, which are all fine, they have to maintain certain insurances and they indemnify us to the extent well, actually it doesn't say to the extent, but to the extent that it's caused by something that they do, their negligent acts, errors, or omissions. But Article 10 reverses most of that. That's a limitation of liability clause, which says that they can never be liable for more than their fee, which is only $250,000. It's just my recommendation that we strike that. I understand completely why they would want to have it in here. It's a good effort, but I wouldn't sign it.
Okay. I'm writing it down.
It's okay. I mean, it's up for negotiation, I'm certain.
But the idea was that Phase 1 is only a study, not a full lot going on other than
Yeah.
preparing a report.
Well, then they won't care about having a limitation of liability because they don't have much exposure.
That's the same type of behavior when I talk.
Okay, fine.
Alderwoman, just hold on for just a second. If there's anyone here that is going to be at the Board of Adjustment meeting at 1:30, that's going to be over in room 208 in the Board of, 2:30 in the Board of Aldermen. For the Board of Adjustment meeting, it'll be across the hall at the Board of Aldermen. Go ahead, Alderman.
And then Article 15, exclusivity, I would suggest we strike that. I don't think it's going to have much bearing in Phase 1, but I think it could have some bearing if we go to Phase 2. And then I guess the other thing I would ask you is under Article 9.1, it says that I think it says that the information is confidential except as required by the Sunshine Law. Do you think that the result of, would the Sunshine Law apply to any work product that we get as a result of this study?
You mean the study itself?
Yeah, I mean, I don't,
That would be public information.
so the study will be public.
Yes. There was another question earlier about this clause. The idea was sometimes when companies with proprietary information and trade secrets are doing work for us, I think sometimes they fear that we'll release information pursuant to a sunshine request that
Yeah.
probably shouldn't be.
Right.
And they just want to have a right to say, hey, wait a minute.
Yeah, well, I don't know if the confidentiality is reciprocal, but hopefully it is. And that's the extent of my questions.
Okay, thank you. I know Alderwoman Davis had a question. If you would please come on up to the mic so we can hear and see you. There you go. Yes. There you go. Thank you, Alderman.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I think that my questions may be a little premature and it may be in the second phase when we get there. But what I was looking for was, because this is just a study, so we're not really into any implementations, but I was looking for some guarantees of certain types of outcomes, and I didn't see that here.
No, there isn't. So you read it correctly. I take it you're really asking why not?
Yes.
All it's designed to do is for them to make a study and propose certain measures that we might take for better outcomes. I'm not sure what guarantee we could reasonably request in that type of work.
Well, in a consulting contract, there are very specific things that I'm looking for. And so I would expect to see some very specific identifiable outcomes to be addressed. And it's a kind of like an open study type of contract. You'll look at some things and we'll see what it comes back with. And so that just bothered me a little bit. And I think the other thing, based on the questions that were asked earlier, I wanted to know what unions or represented in the operations of the water department. I'm making an assumption. One is plumber and pipe fitters. I'm making another assumption that operating engineers. And so I wanted to know all of them because I believe that these people need to be at the table understanding this because it's going to affect them in their ability to perform their task and whether or not some things are real or not when you're doing these types of studies.
I'm going to have to ask Mr. Scobie. I don't know what unions are out there.
Okay.
I can only go by what I heard with the mayor's office. He said the unions are on board, but I don't know if Mr. Scobie can verify that. I think also there's some things you might be able to find in the request for proposals, Alderman, about maybe more specific to what they're looking for. But Mr. Scobie, if you could.
I was just told that Veolia will address this in their presentation because they met with all the unions and discussed it. So can you defer to their presentation?
Oh, absolutely. Thank you. That answer is coming. I'm done. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other members on the committee that didn't get to ask questions? Alderman Cone.
Thank you for coming here today, Michael. A lot of the questions that I had have been asked and answered. Another thing that I'm going through this, I'm noticing in an Exhibit D, which is part of the affirmative action part of this. I don't know if you noticed this morning, but there's rainbow flags flying outside City Hall. And as part of our city's non-discrimination policy, we included sexual orientation, gender identity, and expression. And none of those are covered underneath this affirmative action.
That's a good point. Thank you.
So I would really appreciate it. And it causes me to wonder who wrote this contract, because they certainly don't work for the city.
Well, I will say this was probably taken from another contract. Someone, I guess, for these, we have these in all contracts, and they probably just took.
And the ones with the city always include at least sexual orientation.
There, right?
So at least, and now, as of that law, the past 2 years ago, they should also include gender identity and expression in there as well.
I'll make sure they do. I apologize for that.
Does that conclude your questions, Alderman?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, and I really appreciate you jotting down our suggestions, because again, the Board of Aldermen has no vote in this, and I appreciate you sharing that with us, and hopefully we can see some of the recommendations in the contract.
I think you'll
Okay.
say some of them anyway. So,
Thank you so much.
thank you.
Okay, at this time, I didn't think we were going to get to them because we thought we were going to have to limit with the room and so forth. So at this time, we have some people here from Veolia that would like to speak, and some people from out of town with Veolia. So we didn't want to send you back to the plane without at least being able to utter a word. So whoever is going to speak on behalf of Veolia, would you please approach the speaker. And please state your name and start with your presentation.
Madam Chair, thank you very much, and other aldermen. My name is David Gaddis. I'm an Executive Vice President with Veolia Water North America. I'm also the former president of Veolia Water Indianapolis, formerly known as the Indianapolis Water Company, that was in existence since the early 1900s. I thank you very much for this opportunity today to speak before you, and I think that you are doing your due diligence, and I appreciate that. I've heard a lot of things today, and we appreciate the opportunity to get on record and set some of the things straight that you may have heard, and answer any questions that you may have at the conclusion of our presentation. Here with me today that will also be speaking is Scott Edwards, that is the Executive Vice President of Corporate Communications for us, and then also Steve Siegfried, that is going to be the individual that will actually be managing the contract here. My efforts here in St. Louis, I am the executive in charge of this contract. So I will be the individual that will be on the steering committee as the Veolia individual. Just real quick, a little bit of background on me. I'm born and raised in Indianapolis, Indiana, so I'm a Midwest guy. My father was born just down the road in Poplar Bluff, Missouri. Our family has, a lot of it has relocated here in St. Louis. We're educators in the St. Louis public school systems. So we have great lineage here in St. Louis. So it feels like I'm back at home, to be honest with you, and hopefully afforded an opportunity to help the city of St. Louis in moving forward in its efforts. Let me first of all say that it took a lot of courage for this RFP to come out. You've taken a step, and the mayor has taken a step, that a number of other cities are taking as well. I was with your mayor this week at the U.S. Conference of Mayors, and one of the things that was talked about amongst these 500 mayors are how cities have to come up with solutions and be able to take care of infrastructure and so forth and so on their own, and not rely on Washington to come riding in on a white horse, because it's probably not going to happen. And that's where we come in at. We want to come in and we want to help you. We want to really work with you as well in moving your utility forward. Let me tell you a little bit about Veolia Water. First of all, I'm sure you read a lot about us, but one of the things you may not know is we have 150 years of experience. There's been a lot of talk about competitors, others able to do what we do, and so forth and so on. I've actually sat in the chair that Kurt sits in today. I understand what it's like to get that call in the middle of the night, 2 in the morning, when there's a main break. I understand what it's like to be out there in the frigid temperatures below zero and water spraying in your face and trying to get that last bolt on for that coupling, because I've done it. So I totally understand where you're coming from. I'm third generation water. I'm passionate about what I do. My grandfather was in the business from 1932 until 1962. My dad was in the business since 1961 until 2001. I've been in the business since 1997. So I am passionate about water. I understand that what I do and what I direct, and our company understands it well, can either make people sick or it can actually kill people. You have a great tasting water. We will never put that in jeopardy. You have my word on that. We would not have the number of contracts that we have throughout North America. We serve 550 communities in North America. We have more than a 90% renewal rate with our customers as well. We have more than 3,000 employees here in North America. We have 8,500 water and wastewater plants that we operate worldwide. We've done this before. We do this on a day-to-day basis. Again, we're passionate about what we do and how we do it and how we direct people. Locally here, you've had no issues, I'm sure, in getting heat and those sort of things into the downtown building. Some of you may not know it, some of you may know it, but Veolia is who provides that. We're already doing business with the city. We've not taken over anything. So that should not come into question. The other thing is you have to understand about Veolia is we don't buy utilities. That's not in our MO, that's not what we do. We only own one utility in North America. And it was really an experiment that was issued by the federal government. We don't own utilities. We give consulting services and we execute what the city wants us to do from an O&M standpoint. That's what we do. So, you know, this part about us wanting to purchase the city of St. Louis, I have no interest in that. The company has no interest in that. Our CEO has no interest in that. That's not what we're here to do. We're talking about a $250,000 consulting contract. And it's been explained today as to what that is. The other thing I want to say about locally is we have more than 225 employees here locally today. We have, with this contract, we'll have approximately 650 individuals that will be working for Veolia with the institution of this contract. And if they're still here, I would like for some of those partners in the room to stand up that will be working with Veolia in the future, if you will, please. Thank you very much. These are the people that live in St. Louis. These are the people that we want to bring their talents. We also want to bring subject matter experts. There's been a lot of talk as well about others can do what we do. That may be true, it may not be true. But again, I've sat in the chair of Mr. Scobie, and I've had to make the decision. And I made that decision a long time ago in 2001 to partner with Veolia at that point in time when we were Indianapolis Water. They were the best firm for us to partner with at that point in time. And today, I still believe that. There are a lot of other engineering firms out there that will state they can do certain things, but none of them have 150 years of operations experience. That is what we bring to the table that is different than anyone else brings to the table. We operate some of the largest water and wastewater plants in North America, in the United States, not only in the United States, but in the world, in Berlin, Hong Kong, and other communities. That is what we do, and we're passionate about what we do. The other thing that I want to talk about here real quick is the road that you are taking is the same road that a number of other communities have taken. You are in the mix of some of the greatest utilities that there are in this country. You know, we currently have a contract with the city of New York, the same kind of contract that we're talking about here. It's one of the finest run utilities in North America. 2 years prior to us coming to the city of New York, they had done the same thing. They had looked for efficiencies. They found $50 million of efficiencies 2 years before we entered into that contract. After entering into a contract with us, we were able to find another $120 million worth of savings on a $1.2 billion budget. I understand they're bigger than you, but we have other cities that we work with. Pittsburgh, same type of contract. The other cities that have put out RFPs as well, San Diego, Seattle, Los Angeles, DeKalb County, Atlanta, Georgia, Baltimore, Maryland, Philadelphia, just to name a few. They've put out the same sort of consulting RFP. As Mr. Scobie said earlier, it's about having a new set of eyes. Take a look at what you're doing on a day-to-day basis. It's not about taking over the utility. It's not about giving you bad information. Check our references. Check our references. They've been checked by the selection committee. The selection committee checked all of our references. We do what we do, and we do it very, very well. That's why the vote ended up 4-1. And we won. Fair and square. And it was a great process that we went through. I congratulate Mr. Scobie and the city on putting forth the process that they put forward. It was a fair process. And we've gone through it in other cities. And we've won some, and we've lost some. But we've never asked for a do-over. And we won this fair and square. The information that you have before you from other people, that's not information that came up yesterday. That's information that's been out there for years. And so, again, today, we want to talk about some of that information and let you know some of the things that you're going to hear, we've heard them before, and what's real and what's not real. And we want to talk about that as well today. The other thing I want to talk about real quick, and then I will conclude, is Indianapolis. There's been a lot of talk and rhetoric and media attention brought to the Indianapolis contract. We use Indianapolis as a reference. The mayor of Indianapolis, the past mayor Mark Peterson, and Mayor Ballard, the current mayor, they both give us great references. What we did was very positive in the city of Indianapolis. You're talking about a utility that in 2001, the wait times on the phone were 10 to 15 minutes. We helped them in lowering those wait times to where more than 85% of the calls that came into that call center, 62,000 calls a month, 85% of those calls were answered in less than 30 seconds. It wasn't about adding people. It wasn't about laying people off. That is what we did in the call center. We also took the utility to where they put a 5-year rate freeze in place. We took the utility from an operations budget of $57 million down to $45 million. No layoffs. It's what we call insourcing. We brought work back in for the union workers to do more work. We retrained them. We worked with them. That's what we did. And so this is not about, our recommendations don't include layoffs. We've been told by Mr. Scobie and the mayor's office, there's no interest in laying people off. That's not what we bring to the table. We want to bring very, very intelligent and smart ways to operate and manage the utility. You know, you've heard a figure of 19 million thrown out here to get us out of Indianapolis. That's not the case. And the reason I talk about Indianapolis is because I was there. I ran the utility. My mark is on that utility. I'm very proud of what we did in Indianapolis. The work was great that we were able to do in Indianapolis. We transformed that utility. We made it a world-class utility by working with each and every one of the employees. The ideas are buried in the utility. It's about facilitating and transforming and bringing those ideas to the top and then implementing those ideas. That's what we did in Indianapolis. That's what we're doing in New York. That's what we're doing in Pittsburgh. That's what we do in Tampa Bay. That's what we do in Oklahoma City. The list goes on and on and on. And so we can talk about all of the, all of you know that if there's something bad said, thousands of people hear about it. If something good, only one person hears about it. We've done a lot of good things throughout North America, and we will continue to do those things if hired here in St. Louis as well. The last thing I want to leave you with is that, again, I hope it doesn't come across as that we're angry or that I'm angry. I'm passionate about what I do. I love what I do. I get up on a day-to-day basis and love to go and work with cities throughout North America. I'm working with the city of New York. I'm working with Pittsburgh. We're coming up with new and innovative ideas. But the only way you come to get those new and innovative ideas is opening your door and saying, hey, come on in, take a look at us, and see what we're doing, and if we can do it in a better way. It's not about taking anything over. It's not about terminating people. That's not what we do. Those aren't the decisions that we make in the utilities that we partner with. What we do is we give them advice. And the advice is advice that we come together on and we bring it forward, and it's inclusive. As we told Scobie early on, we're going to need him and his staff to work with us to come up with these ideas. We need to be able, and I'll give you an example. You can easily come in and tell someone, hey, you need to treat water in this manner. But someone else can tell you that's not the way to do it. And I'll give you an example. In Indianapolis, there were individuals that said, hey, we need to let more water over the dam at this certain times of year. And the conclusion was that's not what needed to happen. It was a recommendation, but the utility told us, and they understood that with the game and wildlife, they needed more water because of the nesting of a certain bird that was coming into flight into Indianapolis. So we changed that recommendation. So not every recommendation is going to be the greatest recommendation, but what I can tell you is there will be a number of people that will come together and make sure these recommendations are the right recommendations for the city of St. Louis. And that is the thing that I can promise you that we will do. I've taken up a lot of your time. I thank you for your time. What I would like to do now is allow Scott Edwards and Steve Siegfried to address you regarding certain portions of the contract and what we plan to do, and Scott to talk about some of the other things that you may have read, and then I'll be more than happy to answer any questions that you have. Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Steve Siegfried. I apologize, I've got a cold, so if you can't hear me or there's any problems, just let me know.
I can hear you fine.
I'm a water system operator. I've spent virtually my entire career operating water systems throughout the eastern part of the United States. What differentiates Veolia from the other companies that were interviewed is we operate water systems. If you're looking for someone to look at your electrical system, you get someone who does electrical. If you want someone to look at meters and control systems, that's what you get. Or a professional engineer looks at your, comes up with an engineering solution. We're operators, and we operate systems throughout the country. We have a vast amount of resources available, experts to bring into St. Louis to help optimize the operation here and save money. Got a couple charts I'd like to flip through. The first one is the operation expenses versus the revenue. You can see the rate increase, 19%. Revenues went up, expenses went down. Kurt did a very good job looking at trying to economize. He cut his operation expenses, similar to the same thing that New York City did when they found $50 million of operational expenses that they could get out of the O&M budget. Another rate increase with 11%. This is back in 2013. Since then, those lines have gotten closer together. But the latest rate study that has come out from Black & Veatch, who's the rate consultant, that's okay, shows that you're going to need 2-3% rate increases in the next, not this fiscal year, but the next 2 fiscal years. There's also a $30 million bond issuance that's in that rate study for additional capital expenditures. And even with those increases and with the $30 million expenditure, the system is still in a negative cash flow situation, and it's operated at a loss. What Veolia wants to bring to the table is the ability to cut the operational expenses. An example, just real quick, from New York City. There's been some question about water quality. We do not compromise water quality. What we do is we try and operate things more efficiently. New York City is injecting fluoride for dental hygiene. They weren't injecting all the time at 0.8, which is what their limit is. Sometimes they go a little bit higher. Sometimes they go a little bit lower. We put a feedback loop in their injection system, which tuned it right in 0.8, day in, day out, every minute of the day. And as soon as it dipped or exceeded, the flow pace meters trimmed fluoride dosing. What that resulted in was a $350,000 savings. The expenditure was $50,000. Your return on investment was a matter of less than a month or 2 months. That's the type of thing that we would want to do, is come in and look at every aspect of the system, try and identify savings. One of the other key things that stands out about St. Louis, the amount of water that you use per capita. There were some questions about this figure. The EPA average is 350 gallons per day per customer. Here's some other cities that are similar to the size and demographics of St. Louis. Buffalo, Pittsburgh, Toledo. Buffalo, I've got a lot of experience in. I was up there for an extended period working in that system. St. Louis stands out. The amount of water that's used per customer is extraordinary. One of the things we like to do is to come in and understand where that water's going. Do an audit. Understand, is that leakage? Is that bad metering? Is that going to city buildings and parks that are unmetered? Until you really get your arms around where all the water's going, you can't really start driving the economy and the sustainability into preserving the natural resource, into the electric, the chemicals, and the labor that it takes to produce that water. So that's one of the key items that we'll be looking at.
Could you set those boards with the backside so that the audience can see what you just showed us? If you could just set them there so that they can see. Thank you.
Another one of the items that's been talked about today is labor and potential for layoffs. We looked at the demographics of the employees in the water system. Today, 1/3 of the employees are eligible to retire. Within 5 years or 8 years, you're exceeding 2/3 of the employees. The question is not laying off employees. The question is retaining their knowledge, getting the information that's in their heads, passing it to the future generations. The training that needs to take place, the succession planning that needs to take place. There's going to be a shortage in the very near future. Laying off employees is not an option. Planning and training for the future is really what needs to be done. One of the projects I'm working on right now is Washington, D.C., doing a very similar study that's proposed for St. Louis. One of the things that's interesting is the similarities between the two systems. The size of the water plants, they've got 120 MGD and 220. Kirkland's 120 and a 320. The excess capacity is the same type thing. It's the same percentage of excess capacity. One of the things we want to look at in both systems is how to optimize that capacity. Whether there's any place where we can increase revenue by selling wholesale water, if the meters are fully utilized and fully metering all the flow in St. Louis. So increasing revenue is part of the equation, as well as containing expenses.
I don't mean to cut you off, but about how much more you think you want to go over? Because I do want to give the committee an opportunity to start asking some questions before they start leaving.
I'm good at that.
Okay. You're done?
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much. I know you said there was another person you wanted to present, and if what we can do is, as the alderpersons ask questions, if there's something you can expound on as they ask the questions, or you can offer as you answer the questions, that might help us move along a little faster. I know you traveled a long way to be here, and I hope that someone will be able to be here on July the 2nd. Is that possible?
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Okay, so at this time, if we could start the questioning, because I think this is going to probably wrap it up for the rest of the hearing until we continue on July the 2nd. Alderwoman Young, do you have any questions? She's still here? No. Vice Chairman Boyd?
Thank you, Mr. Gaddis. I certainly appreciate your passion. My question is, I'm stuck on this proprietary, so maybe you can explain why we would pay you to produce a product and you give us the rights to it, but you maintain that it's proprietary to Veolia. I don't get that.
Well, I'll start out and then I'll let Steve piggyback off of that. You know, we don't produce anything that is, we don't introduce any hardware or whatever. What we use is packages that others can use as well. But what we do bring to the table is we bring data from our 150 years of experience and our 8,500 projects that we work with throughout the world. And so that is the data that we want to protect, and also from a pricing standpoint. So it's sort of like, you know, we're willing to give you the sausage, but we don't want to tell you how we really make the sausage to a certain extent. So it's that kind of data that that's beholden to us and that we value, because that is data that does belong to other communities. The same thing, the information from St. Louis. We would not want others to have that data as well, and I'll let Steve piggyback off of that.
Well, actually, Dave hit the key points. All of our operating systems are shrink-wrap software that anyone can buy. So there's no proprietary software that we bring to the table. And the proprietary nature is our price model that generates the sausage. The recipe behind that. We're going to give you the report. The data is yours to use as you see fit.
You use a lot of our data to give us back your data.
Correct.
Why would we need the data from other places?
We do an extensive benchmarking analysis, an example of which is this right here. You know, when you compare St. Louis to other cities which are the same size, it stands out that there's something more to look at.
Okay.
We do the same type of analysis for the kilowatts per million gallons, for the number of customer service agents per customer, dozens of different metrics, benchmark metrics that we use to make sure that, and to identify places where we can bring opportunities for savings.
Okay, but if we can use exclusively all the data, I think my colleague from the 28 asked a question about, I just want to make sure it's a question about, public record and the Sunshine Law. I don't remember what the response was, but isn't this, can't the city put this on the website? So we can publish a report on the website which will include your proprietary data.
It may not include that proprietary data that we utilize in coming up with some of the recommendations. So that would be the report. Yes, it's public knowledge. You can go today and look at the New York City report. There's an executive summary out there, then there is a detailed report. But what it doesn't have in it is it doesn't have all of for example, it doesn't have all the projects throughout the world that are the size of New York City or the size of Pittsburgh. It doesn't list all of their data. We utilize that data in the background to come up with, as Steve mentioned, the benchmarks, the KPIs in running the business, those key performance indicators that make you the best of the best and put you in certain tiers that you can brag about at a later date.
Now, I know there's not a lot of language in here about phase 2, but in your recommendations in the phase 1 process, will there be some guarantees that if we implement the strategies that you recommend, that we will achieve certain savings?
Well, and that's all open for negotiations. The way that we like to try and talk about phase 2 is that if we don't perform, because it's a performance contract, if we don't perform, we don't get paid. And so we want to put some skin in the game. We want to put some risk in the game. And that's unique in this business today. And so you will not hear other competitors that talk about this in the way that we're talking about it. We firmly believe that on the table today, there's somewhere between $5 to $7 million of savings buried in this utility. We firmly believe that. When we get done with phase 1, we will be able to really say what we really think that we can do. The true guarantee is in the negotiation of phase 2, and that some cities have said, you know what, we believe you, and we believe in it so much that what we would rather do, we'd rather pay you for your services, and we keep a larger portion of the savings. There have been some cities that have said, we like what you're talking about, but we're not quite there, so we'll share with you. And so it comes down to, you know, what's the pressure point, how it's negotiated, and so forth and so on. And I'm not here to negotiate it today, but I'm just telling you how other cities have looked at a phase 2 engagement with us. Did that answer your question?
Yes, and this is my last question. In your experience, how often do you matriculate to phase 2?
Here's what happens. Well, first of all, to answer that question, in our experience, every one of them thus far, okay? And the reason why is, first of all, there's a partnership, there's trust, and so forth and so on that's garnered in the phase 1 relationship. Now, we do have, and I'll give you an example in New York City, we may come up with an idea, and they may elect to have someone else to implement, and we're okay with that. And that's the same thing that we're saying here. If Mr. Scobie feels that he has the talent within his utility to implement it himself, he's more than welcome to do that. If he feels he would like to go outside, and as Steve said, there may be someone else out there that has specific skill set that may be better than ours. Okay, we're not saying that we're the best at everything. We would like to believe that, but there may be someone out there that's better at something, and Mr. Scobie may say, I'd rather have someone else implement it. But at the end of the day, what we are talking about, and I would ask you to keep this in your mind, we're talking about transformation. We're talking about changing the way you do business, and we're talking about changing individuals' thought processes in the way that they do business as well. The employees need to understand they own this utility. It's their utility. It's not our utility. We're here to help. And so it is about transformation. It's about a different type of thought process. And that's why we, as Mr. Scobie tried to put earlier, we come in with a learning and a teaching methodology that we bring to the table. And we bring in master communications teams as well to sit down and understand what the utility workers are thinking about, get that information out of them, and then push it back up. So it's not about top down. This is top down, bottom up.
Okay, Ms. Gaddis, thank you, we appreciate it. No further questions.
Okay. Alderman Vollmer?
Okay, thank you. So, to get it clear for everyone, because I think all the emails, all the calls, all the worries I get, you're selling knowledge. This is not the Rosetta Stone package where you tell me that I have to buy this book, these tapes, and these things, or I don't learn the language. So there's no hidden thing. This isn't prom night where you're making all the promises in the world. The next night, it's all over. So that's what every call and every worry from every constituent and you don't have a chemical package in your back pocket that nothing works without. You don't have a hardware package nothing works without.
That is correct.
I just want to make sure that's clear and on the record.
100%.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, Alderman Cole? Any questions? No? Alderman Honowitz?
Thank you. Just a couple. Mr. Gaddis, and I believe you when you say you're passionate about your operation, this, that, and everything else. And I just find it interesting, and maybe you can elaborate on it. You talked about the recommendations from the mayors in Indianapolis. So I guess my question is, maybe you can just answer that. Why would they pay $19 million to get out of the contract?
The reason for that, sir, is they signed a 30-year agreement with us as an organization. And that was in the contract for them to pay that. That was written into the contract. And so what I'm proud to say is that we allow our clients, because there was talk about that earlier, about getting out of the contract and so forth and so on. We allow our clients to get out of contracts with us if they'd like to. Indianapolis, though, I will tell you, they had a unique situation. And their unique situation was that they had a not-for-profit organization, Citizens Gas, that was already set up. And the mayor made a decision that he wanted to sell the utility in order to fund his Build Indianapolis Fund, and also to help with a little small gathering they were having, which was the Super Bowl. And so they needed cash. And that was one way for them to move forward, was for him to sell his utility. He made that decision. But in our contract, it did state that if they, and it was different times throughout the contract, if they wanted to get out of the contract, and not for any reason where we had done something wrong, and because we did not, they would have to pay as part of that exit clause. And so that's what they elected to do. Scott, would you like to elaborate on that?
Yeah, good afternoon. My name is Scott Edwards, and I lead communications for Veolia North America. I would just add one more consideration with respect to Indianapolis. We were actually making millions of dollars of investments in the first 8 years with the idea in mind that we did have a long-term contract and would recoup much of that investment in the second 10-year period. So that was also the basis for that payment.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Alderwoman Ingracia?
Thank you. A quick question. I know that Eddie Roth briefly touched on the fact that a couple of the other companies that submitted proposals had some environmental issues in the past. I did quite a bit of research on all four companies, and obviously when you're in this business, from time to time, things happen that you don't want to have happen. But I'm wondering if one of you can speak to the discussion that the Food and Water group out of Washington, D.C. had concerning your environmental, and that being said, I don't know who backs that.
I'm happy to address that. Again, Scott Edwards, leading communications. With respect to those who question our environmental record, we can only point to the records, to the facts and to the record. And I would point you to a couple of things. First, there was a very interesting New York Times series called Toxic Waters about a year and a half ago, and they compiled through a Freedom of Information Act a very, very comprehensive review of all environmental data in the United States. And they looked over a over a 5-year period, and they found that more than 20% of U.S. water systems were violating key provisions of the Safe Drinking Water Act. They also found in that same period more than 500,000 violations by cities of the Clean Water Act. Now, with respect to Veolia's record, our compliance level is absolutely outstanding. Here in North America, we're serving 550 communities, and often we're coming in to communities with problems because we really, truly are the experts in turning those facilities around. And we can give you many, many examples of that. But even with those, if you will, problem projects, our environmental record exceeds 99% compliance with our operating permits. So when you look at a handful of projects that an organization like Food and Water Watch will point out, what's not being pointed out are the many hundreds of projects that are working exceedingly well, and there's no consideration with respect to what's happening with municipal water systems. So, I mean, we can point to our compliance level, and our clients know this because it's their compliance level. And as David mentioned, our contract renewal rate exceeds 90% in a very competitive environment, especially where we're the market leader.
Thank you. And just one last question. It's my understanding that this form of a contract, this methodology, is fairly new for Veolia. Can you speak to some of the cities that you had mentioned that have similar contracts, when those began, how recently or how long ago, and what the cost of those contracts is to those cities?
I'll take a shot at it first, and then my colleagues can piggyback on that. The cities that we have contracts with, which are New York City, which is fairly new, 2 years ago, we entered into that contract. Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, we entered into that contract, I think, about a year ago. Winnipeg, Canada, we entered into that contract 2 years ago. Other contracts that are similar to it in style would be Buffalo to a certain extent, but you are exactly right. This is a new concept. Other cities that do have contracts like this are San Diego, California, Seattle, Washington has a contract like this that they have, and then the other cities that have contracts on the street today that are for bid are Los Angeles, California, DeKalb County, Georgia, Atlanta, Georgia, Baltimore, Maryland, and Philadelphia. And then the one contract I did not mention that we have today as well, under the same type of deal, is Washington, D.C.
Buffalo, New York started in 2010. That was the project I started up. And Washington, D.C. was signed 2 weeks ago. And I'm assigned to that project also.
Okay. And would those be phase one, similar to what we're doing here?
Those are phase one with a negotiations for phase two for each one of those. So there is implementation involved. You know, the implementation question, And it's one in which, we've signed this contract understanding there may not be a phase two. And we understand that. And each one of our contracts is very similar to the same thing. There may not be a phase two. But we are totally confident that individuals like Mr. Scobie that have been at the helm for years, they understand that implementation is the toughest part of this. And coming up with the ideas is tough as well, but the implementation is tough. If it wasn't, people would have done it a long time ago. And so that's a tough thing to do. And so every once in a while you need a little bit of help. You need a different set of eyes. You need a different way of, it's kind of like those of you that have children. You can tell your child something, and they'll look at you, and they can walk down the street, and someone else will tell them the same thing, and they'll come running home telling you what Mr. Such and Such said. And you're sitting there thinking to yourself, I just said that to you. So sometimes you need that third-party validator or whatever it may be, and so that's where we come into play.
Thank you.
Okay. ST, are we doing okay with tape? So far, so good. Okay. All right. Alderman Ogilvie? Any questions?
Mr. Gaddis, how are you enjoying that new bike trail in Indianapolis?
I travel so much that I don't get to get on the trail, but it does go by my home, and it is what Mayor Ballard has instituted in Indianapolis regarding parks, and his concentration on parks and bike trails has been fantastic. So
some of us should schedule a tour of that, shouldn't we? On this contract, does the buck stop with you? Is the product we're getting, you're going to stand behind that product 100%? Or is there somebody above you that is also partially responsible for this?
The buck stops with me. I'm the executive in charge. I'm the individual that my name is on it. And as I tell people, I'm only as good as the last contract that I worked on. So the buck does stop with me.
Okay. I'm sure you know this, but many folks around the world get to enjoy St. Louis's water because we turn it into beer and bottle it and send it all over the world. Maybe it's unusual, but we've certainly been proud of our record. What if we issued a challenge to say, after phase one, let's do the kind of public outreach that coincides with St. Louisans' existing pride in our water division, so that people, because I do think people actually have a connection to that history. It's been a big part of St. Louis's development, and I think we certainly owe it to people to explain exactly what we're doing and gather their input. So I'll issue that as a challenge. How does that strike you?
I'm fine with that. And if I could just add to that, in Indianapolis, when I ran that operation, one of the things that we had in place was that we had a citizens advisory group, we had a technical advisory group, and so those two groups, they got involved in a number of the decisions that we made at the utility. It was no voting or anything, but they were informed. And so we wanted to basically take the temperature of the public with those individuals first before going to the public. And so that helped us a great deal in operating and managing the utility. Whatever the process may be, we're willing, we have nothing to hide. And so we would be more than happy, whatever the process is for us to go through, we'd be more than happy to do that.
6 months or so into this, give me your off-the-cuff lay of the land of St. Louis and the water division. Where do you think the biggest opportunity is to do something that continues to provide a good service, but also puts the water division on more solid footing? What stands out to you, and how do you think, without giving me the proprietary details, how do you think you'd like to address that?
Well, if I could, I'd like to defer to my colleague that will actually be on the ground 24 hours a day, 7 days a week here in St. Louis. But before I leave the microphone, the other thing I'd like to say is we're actually the company gave St. Louis the award for the best tasting water. So we take a lot of pride in that as well. But I'll allow Mr. Siegfried to answer that question if I may.
The two largest things that I see are on the poster boards that I showed you, the amount of water that's used per customer, trying to get our arms around that, where all the water goes. Very significant savings involved with that. The other thing is the attrition that's going to be taking place with the workforce and getting your arms around how that's going to take place, how are you going to staff in the future. Those, I think, are the two biggest opportunities.
Okay. I want to ask one more question. It's kind of a tough question. I look at you guys kind of like the doctor, right? We've got a water division that has it's a little older than it used to be. Maybe it's carrying a little extra weight, and we'd like to keep it healthy into the future. But you don't want to have to go to the doctor every month for the rest of your life, right? You want to go back to living your life like you did before. Give me the exit strategy. How does this end?
We want to be the trainers. We want to be the guys who are here on the ground, training you how to eat less, how to exercise more, how to be a more fit utility. And once we've changed the behavior, once we've changed the, done the change management and worked all the way through, we're going to work ourselves out of the job. After we've done the study, if we move on to phase 2, once that's done, we're not here in the long term.
3 to 5 years in most of the contracts.
3 to 5 years, yes. Thank you.
Okay, we have some other colleagues here who may want to ask questions. Okay. At this time, we're going to have members of the audience who may still be here. So if you're here and you cannot, this was the request of the chairwoman, if you cannot be here next Tuesday, you're welcome to come up.
Not the first on the list.
Step up, sir, state your name.
Doug Ziegler.
Who you represent.
I'm just a concerned citizen. I don't get paid by anybody.
Thank you, sir. Go right ahead.
And yes, we do have a great water here in the city of St. Louis, and it concerns me greatly that we might turn this over to a multinational French corporation who has a checkered past as far as what they've done around the world. And so I'm just going to make this real short and just give you maybe 10 or 15 little incidences in cities in this country where they've had problems with their business model, we'll say. I believe, though, that as far as Indianapolis goes, there was class action suits against this company, and they faced investigations, and eventually I think maybe it may have been as much as $26 million that the citizens of Indianapolis had to kick back to them for their profit. In San Francisco, California, they were sued for dumping 10 million gallons of untreated sewage in San Francisco Bay. In Richmond, California, they were sued for dumping 17 million gallons of untreated sewage in the rivers. In Bridgeport, Connecticut, the mayor was convicted for taking kickbacks, bribes, and extortions from this company. In Danbury, Connecticut, the city gave them a contract for $10 million. In other words, the city was short of money, so these folks up fronted them $10 million so they could pay their bills, but eventually they had to kick back $26 million to this corporation. In Delaware, this for-profit corporation failed to upgrade and repair for years, causing environmental spills, odors, etc., and then caused the rate hikes to the water bill to go up 55%. In Burley, Idaho, they canceled the Veolia contract in 2009 because they didn't believe they were doing the repairs and neglected the water system. In Tama, Iowa in 2011, they entered a 20-year contract to save money. In New Orleans, a Veolia executive was convicted of bribery. In Lee, Massachusetts, they rejected the bid from Veolia because it appeared to be a scheme for a regional for-profit sale of water. In Lyon, Massachusetts, they were forced into contract costing the city $22 million. In Rockland, Massachusetts, the contract was terminated because of embezzlement charges involving city officials and Veolia executives. In West Carrollton, Ohio, mismanagement caused explosion, causing a $50 million damage to the water plant. In, excuse my writing, Maryville, Pennsylvania maybe, Veolia employee was caught dumping toxic waste into a storm sewer. In Angleton, Texas, failure to maintain staff led to a lawsuit and termination for breach of contract. In United Kingdom, they had a big contract, and the corporation, multi-corporation, was in so much debt in France, they had to liquidate the whole water system the water system in the United Kingdom, and they sold it to a holding company of Morgan Stanley so they could get some money to pay off their debts. It's really unreasonable to even consider this company. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else here that's still on this list that cannot speak on the second? Yes, sir. What is your name?
David Stokes.
Let's see. Where are you at on here? Come on up to the microphone, David Stokes. I saw your name earlier. Okay, I see you're on sign up for the pro side. Okay, go ahead, David.
I appreciate this opportunity. I do have a personal conflict on Tuesday night, so I appreciate you allowing me to speak now. I will be very brief, and with your permission, I didn't get a chance to prepare formal testimony since I heard about this yesterday, but if it's okay, I'd like to submit something via email to the clerk and the committee chair and all the members of the committee either tomorrow or Friday. Yes. A little more detail. And thank you very much. With that, I will be very brief. My name is David Stokes. I work for the Show Me Institute. We are a Missouri public policy organization based in the Central West End. We do have water meters. I have one on my phone for our meter. I do think whatever we do, whichever company is hired, I think installing meters is, and this is going to be a major part of my testimony, is certainly going to be a major way to improve water service going forward. And I think the city of St. Louis deserves great credit for involving the private sector and the expertise of the private sector in improving water delivery for the people and the citizens of St. Louis. And I think this committee deserves a lot of credit for looking at it toughly and asking tough questions and taking it seriously. It is a very big decision, but I think that the private sector can bring a lot to this discussion. This is not privatization. I know what privatization is. This isn't it. This is a consulting deal that I think can have a lot of benefits for our region. I would propose one sort of historical example. It's not directly on point, but I think everybody who plays golf in Forest Park would agree how much better Forest Park Golf Course got after the private sector was brought into that course and helped make some changes to the public course there. Again, it's a little different. The private sector sort of took over management in a way that the private sector won't be doing here, but nonetheless, that golf course really improved in the number of rounds and the quality of the course and the number of events held there. It really got better for the people who used it. And I would hope, and I'm confident, that something similar will happen here with Veolia or whichever company is chosen. I think that the final deal will be really excellent for the people of St. Louis. And with that, I will submit all my additional commentary via email to the members of the committee, and I appreciate this opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Stokes.
Thank you.
Okay. Is there anyone else that signed up on this pro or con list? I know you were at Veolia. Are you Mr. Murphy?
Mike McCarty. Jacobs.
Okay, come on up. Mike, I see you. Okay, you are, now before I go on with you, I usually try to go pro-con, but is there anybody else on this list that is present? Okay, so that'll be 2 pros in a row. So go ahead, Mr. McCarthy.
Yeah, my name is Mike McCarty. I'm with Jacobs Engineering. We're proud to be part of the Veolia team here in St. Louis. Jacobs has a long history with the city of St. Louis. We've been presence here since 1947, have over 350 employees right here in downtown St. Louis. So we're excited to be able to collaborate not only with Veolia but with city staff to help come up with some innovative solutions to help the city system operate more efficiently. You may be aware Jacobs has a relationship with MSD, and over the past 10 years as part of the watershed planning, we've demonstrated over $90 million in savings, coming up with innovative ways to implement capital improvements and things of that nature. So those are the types of things that we'll be excited to bring to the team and help to come up with some innovative solutions. So thanks for the opportunity to let me speak.
Okay, thank you. And that is a wrap because the tape is done. Oh no, we still got a tape? Okay. All right, well, that will conclude today's hearing. We will continue July the 2nd. I really appreciate everyone just being so open, the water department, representatives from the Board of VNA, the committee members, I appreciate you being here. And we'll see you on July 2nd at 6 p.m. here in room 208.